Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Stefan, for these great contributions to this conference. We're going to end now, but we're going to have a panel discussion, and I hope you all want to join us for that, for the final questions. It's very difficult to wrap up something like this. You cannot do it because it goes on and on and on, and we learn through working with it. I'm Ann-Sofi Noring. I'm co-director at Moderna Museet, and I've been with the museum since 2001. And since 2010, I work with Donny Birnbaum as director, and we've had a very good relationship and a good dialogue, and it has been good when we had the Kokoschka case to be in this dialogue and to share some of the problems to solve what got to be the solution for us. As I started in 2001, I've also lived through the Nolde case you brought up here. Emil Nolde, Blumengarten, we gave back finally after a couple of years of discussions. And I must say we have gone a long way, though we're still in the beginning in Sweden. Because at that time, as I recall, we had the idea, the very naive idea that, okay, the owners got money. They got money for the works stolen or just destroyed. So then it was okay with the case. We are a public museum. I will not say this is right, this is wrong, but that was the way we discussed it. We're a public museum. We want to show as much art as possible publicly. We do it for public good. We're a state museum. It's better to show than to have it on the market. So we tried to get this going with the discussion, and a bit into this discussion, we discovered that we were on the wrong trail, really, very wrong. But the solution was not only to give back the painting, it was also an agreement with the heirs that we should keep the painting for 5 years in the museum. And there I come to the question of transparency and to make this history public. We tried in a way, it was naive, I think, but we tried to keep on showing it for 5 years in our museum to also say, we have nothing to hide. This was the solution. We bought this in the 60s and we did wrong. We tried to keep it and now it's given back, but we still have it here. I would like to have your opinions on that decision we made with the heirs. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm really astonished that you publicly say we were wrong. I don't think I've ever heard a German museum director or curator saying this sentence. I don't know if they think it at all, but even if they would think it, I don't know if they would say it. It's a taboo to be wrong about something, I think. So, congratulations. I think this argument that it's the work of art is in a safer place in a public museum is very common. We hear it all the time still, not so much more today, not so much anymore today than before. But we think we are the ones who know best how to treat our artworks. And I can tell you, we do our best in our museums, but of course there are a lot of blind spots in every great German museum, and I'm sure you know this, huge collections and things we don't know about, things that, you know, we can't find also. And it's why I think we should question this self-image that we have. And also, like, if we have this high ethic, and I would include myself, that all art should be public, I think this would actually be the greatest thing, then why don't we start with all the other private collectors that we have all in our cities and countries that also have art privately owned in their houses. Why do we start this discussion on the Jewish arts, on the art from the Jewish heirs that we want to give back? Do we have a problem with publicly or privately owned art? Is that our problem? Or do we have a problem to give an artwork back to a Jewish former owner? So, yeah, does it answer your question? I could say so much, but...
Stefan, how about the solution, 5 years, with a painting which was already owned by the former owner?
Of course, sometimes it takes time. This is why I was very astonished how fast it went with the Kokoschka painting now. But two things. First, the Washington Declaration says not there has to be the decision restitution or not. It demands a fair and just solution, and that means a variety of possibilities. I remember that in 2001, I was visiting the daughter of a Jewish collector in Israel. It was about a Liebermann painting, and she told me, well, Mr. Koldehoff, do you really think I want to hang this here on the wall of my small apartment in Tel Aviv? What I want is that Germany accepts that injustice was done, and that there should be a small plate next to the painting and saying this was formerly the property of so and so. And I think a small compensation was paid, but she was fine with that. And if this is her decision, also that might be a fair and just solution. That's the first point. The second point is the Washington Declaration explicitly says we won't have 120% certainty about KSIT. It's been 70 or 80 years meanwhile, so please make a decision in time, because people are getting older, they still have the right to get a solution, however it might be, but you don't need the absolute certainty to discuss a fair and just solution, whether it might be restitution or another way. And maybe connected to that, an argument which was also already mentioned in one lecture before is, I think Julia Voss said it, that very often the argument is, well, if we give it back to a family, it's no longer available for public. Then it goes to a private collection or to an auction. Why not? If it is the property of a family who had been robbed of that painting 70 years ago, now gets it back, it's absolutely their thing what to do, whether to make 16 million at Christie's or donate it to another museum or whatsoever. So I think sometimes we are, there's a German saying, wie das Kaninchen vor der Schlange, like the hare in front of the snake. We are only think there's only black and white. We lose the painting or we don't. And I think we need the consciousness that much more is possible than that. So restitution of the Nolde, restitution of the Kokoschka, maybe with the next painting in your museum, a completely other solution, who knows?
Yes, we shall not think in terms of losing, I think, but maybe we might say that we sometimes make mistakes. I was thinking of what Arne Ruth told us about his ideas about transnational agreements and how you could cross the borders. And I must say that we've had very good help from you, Julia, and from your museum for the Tilla case, because we have similarities in between these paintings and about their history. Were you surprised by the restitution of the work here in Stockholm, that it didn't take as long time as it did for you? Were you a bit surprised, or how did you react?
I mean, as you could hear from my talk, we're not so proud of taking such a long time. I'm not so proud that it took 5 years for the restitution. So I think time is always relative. How much time you need to get a case clear is very relative. When I talk to provenance researchers, it can never be enough time, and you make a deadline till then you research something, and then this deadline comes, and then they go, yeah, but we have to wait. There's this book that will be published in 1 year, and we have to wait this, and maybe there's more information in it. We're positive there will be information, so we wait for the book to be published. No more information. Yeah, but maybe now we've heard from this person somewhere in China that had in contact with, you know, and it could always be something that would help the case. And if you're deep inside a case, it means you really research, and it's very, very complicated. So you could need time, but it's not the point, you know. The point is that at some point you have to make a decision and you have to fix it. And these cases are never clear. Some very few cases are very clear, where you can say it was really looted. I have a document that's looted. But in most cases, it's just, you know, wie sagt man, Indizien, like hints, and they have to be interpreted. And then you have to make a decision which is also a courageous decision because it's based on interpretation of facts. So it's a very abstract question if 5 years is long or 2 years is long. It depends on the case.
And then it's again the question who decides, which has been discussed earlier, and who carries out the research. Is it someone from inside the museum, or couldn't it be easier to have someone from outside who has not this conflict of interests, which has been described earlier? I think, Daniel, if you're thinking about setting up anything here in Stockholm, I think this is a very crucial point, which Julia Voss mentioned. Inside or outside, who can make the decision and who carries out? And money is needed for that research. We in Germany put money now into 2 professorships for art, for how is it called? Research or something. Yeah. So another step on the way to academization, but not to really working with the heirs and finding a solution with them. And of course, scientists always want that certainty, which in that range often is simply not possible.
I already see hands waving, wanted to ask questions, but I will keep it a bit longer here up in the panel, and then I'll leave it to you. Yes, what is the point for making a decision? That you never know. And in our case with the Kokoschka, we had help from a researcher in Germany, in Berlin. And I can recall your impression of how it can go on. There is always more facts to find, of course. The thing is for us is that we did not really find the facts because facts are gone. But we have indices, and we had really a gut feeling. Towards the end, it's the gut feeling counting very much also, that it had to be the blame on us because it looked like very much like 99% that this painting had been a painting Flechtheim really wanted to get rid of, and he had a reason for that. He really wanted to get rid, and if you have reason, it's because you have something at stake. Oskar Kokoschka lived until he was in 1980, and he never made any claims, and no other owners. But we don't know for the future if there will be other claims. We don't know, but now it's sold for from our side, and we'll see how it will continue. We were talking about just and fair solutions. That's a very tricky one. That is something where you have to agree, and as we have seen, it's endorsed by more than 40 countries, but only 5 countries now have panels, and so it's a minority having panels at all. With all your experience here, Julia and Stefan, have you any advice or thoughts about this? How can we continue, and how can we, you from a museum and you from the press and me here from Stockholm, help each other to get this better?
I mean, we are not really experts in Germany of finding, we haven't been so far of finding just solutions. I don't know of so many, really. Maybe Stefan, you followed more cases. In my institution, we only either restituted a painting or we kept it, but there are different scenarios possible. Either, you know, you talk money, you don't give a painting, but you, like for example, the one Flechtheim painting in Bonn was settled. And the Kunstmuseum Bonn acknowledged that there was, the painting was looted, and they settled for half the market value with the heirs. So this could be maybe a solution if both parties agree to that.
I would add that I think the heirs or the victims' side, so to call it simplifying, they have to say, now is the point that we have a fair and just solution. It's them who have to decide that, not mainly the museum. The museum can make offers and go into negotiations, but I think it's the other side who has to say, okay, this is right for us. This feels for us right. We have, by the way, because you said we didn't get everything together on the Kokoschka painting. We were only talking about the Washington Declaration. In Germany, we have a second one, 1 year after, the Gemeinsame Erklärung of the central government, the federal states, and the cities, because public museums are run in Germany by those three. And they said in that Berlin Declaration, well, a museum has to prove that it is the rightful owner, and if it cannot, we have to discuss the matter. So it's not the heirs or the victims who have to prove that. Maybe that's worth thinking about.
It is, because when we had the Nolde case, we thought the other way around. So I think it has developed the ideas of who has to prove. Yeah.
Yeah. Another point in that connection, do you think that your museum has become any worse since the Kokoschka is no longer there? It's still a great and fantastic museum with a great and fantastic collection. So maybe also in the mind of directors and curators, something has to change. We don't have to keep everything on every price.
Julia, you were talking about contextualizing, and I think you did it in a very good way, how you can treat these issues and to give them out and make a very interesting story. And we have had other speakers yesterday and today telling us about other ways of dealing with provenance and so on. Have you any advice for us to think of for how treating this? I mean, in our collection, as Daniel mentioned yesterday, we're a very Western museum, and we are very American, very French, and that's from way back. I mean, the National Museum didn't really like German art. That's a very simple way to put it. But this means that we have a lack. We really have. We don't have that much.
You're not the only European museum that has that lack.
No. So we could talk about this. Contextualizing, you're still working on contextualizing, because that's the work of a curator, of course. But
yes, you know, this is not really my job that I was talking about. I'm a curator for prints and drawings at Museum Ludwig, and I do exhibitions on any medium. And with that, I'm part of a curatorial team, and we discuss this view on our collection permanently, as I'm sure you do too. And also we think about what kind of exhibitions we can do in order to adjust this view on our collection. And personally, I can tell you I'm also doing exhibitions that would enforce the other side. So I did an exhibition on Otto Freundlich, for example, in order to put the view on someone who was neglected, because exactly he wasn't there anymore after 45 to talk about his art and to find a gallery that would present his work and bring him back up in discussion. Or I did an exhibition with a filmmaker who was very engaged in finding the people persecuted in the German film industry, which was the biggest industry and the biggest group of people who had to flee in the cultural sector. Germany already in 75. So, I want to work also on the Sinti and Roma, not just about the Jews. I mean, there are many things you can do in your museum, and it always involves your collection. We bought a film by Straub-Illier on Kandinsky and Schönberg, and Schönberg accusing Kandinsky of anti-Semitism in 1923. So presenting such a film is getting things going in the minds of the audience, and I think it's just as much our job then to research single works and give the information on the labels, of course. I mean, that's kind of the most basic thing we have to do.
That's a very good piece of advice. We're planning now for reinstalling the whole collection, so I think these thoughts are very much into the minds of our curators. Yes. And Stefan, the press has power, as we know, media, and responsibilities. And we have heard about the queues lining up for the Gurlitt exhibition. So there is a big public interest in these issues. Sometimes you can mix this interest with the interest in scandals, but I'm too positive to think that it's about that. It's about a real good human interest in knowing more. And have you any advice for us how to deal with media more than being as transparent as possible in these issues?
I have to admit, I don't know what happened after the Kokoschka restitution, in what way you made it public. That's the only way to say we came to a decision. These are the reasons why. I talked with Catherine before. In Austria, it's fantastic. You have a dossier of hundreds of pages with all the historic documents where you can follow up. Was it a good decision? Was it not? What was the situation? And so on. So as much transparency as is possible. And always also mentioning this is the art which belongs not, as it was said before, to a curator, a director, a museum. This is art which belongs to all of you. And we took that decision also for you. You no longer own a work that was probably in the museum as a result of the Holocaust. That can be a good feeling. And that still happens too less in Germany. And also at the Beratende Kommission, they now, I think 2 years ago, decided to make their decision, or to give reasons for their decisions. Before that, it was one page. It was a press release of one page, just summarizing they are getting that back, or they can keep that, but no reasons, no documents. I think that's not the right way.
I'm sure you would do this anyway, but it's just an obvious thing to me is about how to deal with claimants. Julia Friedrich made the very good point that often museums don't deal with claimants at all. There's just this exchange of letters immediately. And this happens a lot in Germany, that the museums are basically terrified when they get a claim for an artwork. Whereas, in fact, they could see it as a chance to find out more about their collection, more about their history, the biographies. I mean, I have written about so many claimants' family like Stefan, and the biographies are always absolutely fascinating of the people who've left the country and how they've rebuilt their lives elsewhere.
At what stage, at what point would you do that?
I mean, I don't see why you can't do it from the beginning, why you can't invite them. So even when it's not actually resolved one way or another, and leave permission to the lawyers to the panel, whatever. I mean, I don't see why you can't have this discussion early on.
It sounds funny if I'm saying that, but there might be reasons of data protection in favor of the claimants also. Would you like to have written in the newspaper that you're getting back your Van Gogh painting for 16 million, or only claiming that?
Well, I mean, there may be reasons why the claimants don't want to be known. That's a different question. But if a family comes to a museum saying, we think you might have our painting, often it's also like the painting is part of a history of the museum, that it can be a collection that has somehow gone to the museum, or there can be, a whole history behind it. Then surely in these cases, the museum should welcome the chance to find out more and to meet people who, in some way or another, have contributed to its collection. So, I mean, and I think they are so reluctant to do that and so afraid. There is so much, fear involved.
I would say also it has to do with that sometimes that we can be on different sides of a table also, and as the one who is making exhibitions and collecting arts and all that and being out there, we are of course criticized a lot, and we have to be criticized, and you don't always get written what you want to get written. And sometimes things are printed in a totally wrong way also, and then you are sitting duck. You cannot really go out and say this is wrong. Maybe you get one sentence next day if you're lucky. So what I think this conference, I will not conclude in any way, but which makes me very, very happy, is that it seems like we can have some sort of cooperation here, media and museums and researchers, and then we can hope for the politicians, because in the end they are the ones funding what we're doing, and we don't have any funds for this. The Kokoschka case and all the case, everything we have to pay with money we don't have. So we need that, and to discuss panels and to open up the borders, I think would be a wise thing to do, actually, not to see it as a very national thing, because this is broader than that. Before we leave the word and the questions to the audience, would you like to add something, Stefan or Julia, before we hand out the questions here?
I only have one short remark. I was very impressed by the map which Christian Fuhrmeister was showing with the two white spots, namely Switzerland and Sweden. And as he said, and I want to stress that, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that either Switzerland, it was said before, or Sweden cannot have problems with the topic of Nazi-looted art. Because we have, I think, about 40,000 museums in Germany. And we are not talking about big works of art. The Nazis also seized silver forks and chandeliers and whatsoever. They robbed everything out of the residences or apartments of Jewish people. So it can also be in a Heimatmuseum or Kunstgewerbemuseum or what else. So every museum which is not explicitly dedicated to post 45 art might be affected by that. And also, we're living in a global world with a global art market everywhere. There have also already been looted works of art be found in Southern America and in Alaska, and there are no more white spots.
Julia, shall we ask the audience now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So let's see who is waving here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to start by praising Julia Friedrich for her talk. It is, I would say, the best paper I've heard in the past couple of years, and I hear a lot of papers, and this is a rare thing. But this is the second thing that ties in with my, let's say, view of the conference as a whole, because this is an open-ended exploration looking for a way how to deal with things. And this is also very, very rare, that people sit down, various disciplines, perspectives, and so on, stakeholders, institutions, and discuss what do we have to consider in solving an issue like Nazi-looted art here. And I'm very much in favor of doing this, and my personal, let's say, impression is that the question of interests / power is even more important than I ever thought. Because this is nothing that can be solved within the traditional humanistic disciplines. So we have this set of things like facts or data, interpretation of data. So we're still in the field of the humanistic disciplines. But then if we go into the field of action, we engage with very, very many different interests, and we are engaging with power relations, and it is complicated because research and restitution works has conditions to make it happen in the first place. So we have to lobby to be enabled and empowered to do the information gathering, to do the things we're talking about. So this is a nice, complicated setup that we're facing here, and I'm very happy for this conference in pushing it to this point, because this is also, again, a rare thing.
Now it's Arne Ruth.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Friedrich and Mr. Koldehoff for their lectures, because I learned a lot from them, as I've learned a lot in general today, I must say. I mean, it started new reflection as to issues of this kind. But I have two questions. One is that when I talked about cross-border elements in this for the future, I'm not just thinking about the formal dimensions. For instance, when it comes to the gold issue, the Nazi gold issue, I collaborated with a Swiss journalist, and we could help each other. We knew things which we wouldn't have known without this kind of collaboration. So what I wonder is, even this particular conference is a means of establishing new personal relationships. The point about personal relationships is that you don't have to be as careful about formalities. You can sort of say something which you're not totally sure about, and you can discuss it in a sort of in a loose way, which is an element of testing concepts. So that's my first question. The other is that I was also very struck by this map and the two white spots on it. But there was also another element in it, which was Eastern Europe. Now, Eastern Europe, after the war, redefined the issue of private property. It had obviously also been part of the German handling of art. So how does one judge that from two perspectives? What actually happened to art in this area after the war? How was it dealt with? And how can one deal with it now, including the horrible dimension that Hungary and Poland are now the two worst anti-Semitic political systems in Europe? Thank you.
Herr Fuhrmeister.
I know a little bit, but not really enough to answer that question, because it is very complicated, and you see, with regard to coming to terms with the past, we have already noted a number of, let's say, German achievements or things that went well, and one might quote the system of Gedenkstätten or documentation centers on the sites of former concentration camps and so on and so forth, which presents a stark difference to the way some of those sites are handled, for example, in Poland and so on. But this is also it is very complicated, because looking at Poland, you have Polish losses. They were very well documented, and then you have Red Army taking over, destroying the written evidence and documentation of the Polish losses. So in the 90s, they started again to rebuild from nothing, from the scratch. So, and of course, you have, since we are talking about patrimoine, cultural heritage, this national identity is always tied to it. So what is the Polish national identity? With regard to cultural heritage, it is a status of victimhood on the one hand, but what about the collaboration issue? Because you have the complete transfiguration, you have Lemberg, Lwów, so you have also border changes, Upper Silesia, East Prussia, taking into custody objects into national state property again, and maybe also from private places. So this, it is a truly huge task, but I can see no other way instead of what you call transnational cooperation or cross-border cooperation in order to discuss this. This is very much needed if this is going to be a, let's say, viable continent at all. So because those are the past conflicts that haunt the present and are also partly responsible for the nationalistic trends you stated. So this is tied into politics, if we like it or not.
But I wanted to ask you if you would like to publish the provenance of Kokoschka, Marquis de Montesquieu, because there's a lot more story about it. Because the Emil Nolde case was published at the Geneva Art Center, the chronology exactly from the beginning. And when you go to the Moderna Museum and try to find the chronology, there's just a very short notice. So I wonder if you plan to do that. Thank you.
Of course, we want to have the provenance out as much as possible. Regarding the service we have on the website, which is called Söker samling, search the collection, we're working on that, and we try as hard as we can with the team we have. So we will do it better. We have at least we have never hidden the fact that it had been bought and acquired by Wömel. That has been a fact all the time, so that has been obvious from the very beginning. So I don't think we have hidden anything, but we can, of course, add a lot of facts and interesting material. That would be great if a researcher came to us, or somebody from the outside, or Anders Rydell, if he would like to write a book on this. Maybe that could be an interesting thing. I would really like to have him in the museum and to give as much information as possible. That would be a fine, good thing to do.
Hello. I just want to tell you that I know it's already a European initiative of a law, European law, on this issue. So this kind of debates is very, very important and very good. I hope maybe in some two years, maybe something like this could be a legislative proposal, EU proposal on this. So I wish you good luck with the debate and everything on this.
That's wonderful news. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really interested in what kind of law would it be, because I was also thinking if there was this debate, or it should actually be international and we should work more across borders and stuff. I mean, every EU citizen can also address the EU Commission, because I mean the Commissioner of Culture, whoever is responsible in that case, might not be informed in every what needs to be done. So I mean, if you have so many people who are interested in the same subject and actually say, oh, it would be good to have a panel which is actually EU-wide or something, I mean, you could just take the initiative, write a letter, or somehow address the Commission and say, okay, this is an issue that might not be the first one on the list to be tackled now, but something that the EU should think about. Or so it's not, one doesn't always need for someone else to step in, or for the Commissioner to have the idea himself or herself. I actually don't know who it is at the moment. But yeah.
both the Commission and the European Parliament is already involved in this, and they have started just to do, you know, kind of, you know, to really pre-phase stay now and to write a law about it. But I think it's, I think also maybe some of you can contact the European Commission on this and tell you. I know that they follow also what you say. And you can.
Just a very brief comment as a historian, but first of all, thanks to both of you, specifically Julia, for your very powerful and, you know, also very critical paper that I thought was very important. And I mean, I can't say specifically, you know, if it fits everywhere, but the general picture, I think, is 100% on target. I really think it's important. As a historian, and I have the feeling people here mainly are more like from museums or art history and so on, I do think one should, especially if one looks at this from the perspective of Jewish history, take maybe sometimes also broader perspectives, because in a way, through this lens, that is a very interesting one, and one go on and on and on to discuss in more details in other countries, etc. But we are still always in a certain way looking at a very small group of Jewish bourgeois collectors that somehow then are in the center of those discussions, because they have the means and the interest to collect art. And as we know, this is only a very, very small history of the Holocaust that we are looking at through this lens. It's a very interesting one and a very stimulating one, but I think it would be interesting to think for future research, how does it tie in with other perspectives? I mean, it was mentioned, I think, you mentioned the kind of Judensilber, or however it was called, the kind of grabbing of pretty objects from Jewish families. I know it from my own family, tales of things that were looted and so on, that were kind of minor things that no one cares for. Here we are only talking about of great artworks that one can tie back, and therefore we still have the means to follow them up. But they also portray a specific perspective on Jewish history of Europe that is very limited. This is the only point I want to make.
Yeah, very important. And Maria Eichhorn reminded us at the last documenta what this other huge part of looted objects are. And I thought that was a very strong work by her in showing just the catalogs of household goods that were robbed and going through. Maria Eichhorn, German conceptual artist, who very early, like Hans Hake, there are some artists who really very early, before any museum or Washington was getting involved, thinking about these things in their artworks in German museums also.
You're perfectly right, and I mean it is the art museum's discussions, but it is already expanding. And as far as I can see, for example, exhibition in Munich, Stadtmuseum, Caroline Lange, a project called Frau Kohn's Kaffeelöffel, which is indeed about the myth of, on the eve of deportation, the household goods are given to the neighbor as a construction, as a narrative, yeah, that's the myth. And to have, and this is everyday objects, or if you look at one of the few places where Gestapo files are preserved, which is in Würzburg, you have 21,000 files on individual families, and there everything is at stake. It's clothing. It's not only, let's say, Rembrandt. So there are, because this is why I would say it is the category of provenance that is the relevant thing to add to the existing disciplines into our, let's say, conceptual framework of investigation. And then I wouldn't differentiate between, I would put as much effort into solving the spoon case or the watches that I showed as the Van Gogh. So I wouldn't differentiate. To me, it would be, as a research challenge, it's the same for me. And maybe it's even more difficult, of course, yeah. But I have one more thing. So, because what I really like about the discussion, that the relevance of stating your own interests is very, very important, and it's more important than I thought before. So to be outspoken why you are doing what you are doing, because it's rarely without second thought or hidden agenda and so on, to spell out the interests of what we are doing as people in our various professions. That is, I believe, very important, and it will not solve anything, but it will help to understand why people react to different things, if it is stated at least. Because usually, I mean, that's the Flechtheim database is one of the key examples for that, and it is, and there's a lot of, let's say, good things are happening, but they could be even much more better if they would be more outspoken of what is the aim of this or that effort. So that is also one of what it trickles down to me, how I would interpret, let's say, the message of the conference.
I think there are different layers, you know, that people are always outspoken. I mean, the official, like the official opening speeches for this conference, or also the introduction text on the Flechtheim website. Of course, we want to resolve history, and we want to, Wiedergutmachung is the very German term for what we're talking about. But what are the hidden interests? You know, what is the layer below this? And this, I think, we need to make conscious. And all the ideologies that we all have in our minds, in our own profession, we are the museums with the masterpieces, and the Germans are the best Vergangenheitsbewältiger in all Europe and the world. And all these things, we have to also question them. What is a concept of neutrality, and how do we, if we talk now about the provenance researchers of the future, that is it really just the structure we have to talk about, that they're not employed in the museums? Is that really the only problem? How do we find a provenance researcher who's doing neutral research? Or what does independency, that was a term yesterday, mean? Really, is it just how they are paid? Does that make them independent? Or isn't, as I pointed out, also the collective they're part of, and the whole thinking process, and what they've gone through since they were children? Isn't it so inherent in all our minds already? So how do we get out of this, and how do we have a research that is asking the right questions and going in the right direction? I think that's your task, no?
I would say that questions are often better than answers. I think, Julia, you wrapped it up very well there, because we all have interests, but we all want to do good. And at certain points in history, things don't come together really, but I think this is a moment to make it much better, and to see if we can make it even much better tomorrow and the day after tomorrow for the next generations who are going to be interested in these cases and these histories in a much more intelligent and deeper way than we have been able to. But we will try to work for that. That's something we have to do together, and that's also together with the press, so there is no conflict in that sense. I'm not a woman to wrap this up because we have had 2 days of long discussions. I think Daniel had something to say, and I think the host for the whole conference has something to say. So shall we here on the panel leave over the microphones? And
no, we can do it like this because it's not summing up. It's really a big thank you. And Arpad, it was just before the summer that we started to talk about this, and here we are with a wonderful group of very, very important people in this field. I'm very happy this happened. And I mean, primarily it teaches us how little we know, how little we've done, and how much that remains. I mean, we maybe came with the wish that if we just had a commission, everything would be solved. Maybe not quite, but at least that was the starting point. We know that we have only kind of reacted rather than acted to a certain extent. It's kind of damage control. You know, not just to media or to specific requests, I have to say, but to, you know, the top of the icebergs where we think this could be a problem, we're going to research this. It's so much more interesting, actually, especially the case that we just had with Flechtheim and the Swedish collector Rolf Demaret, who was his great friend. There is another case, you know, I can mention it, and it's a portrait which we used for the invitation card. Many of you have probably seen this. It's not a world-famous artist. He is quite well known for that portrait because it's one of the better portraits of Mr. Flechtheim, with whom he had a love affair. It's a Swedish artist called Nils von Dardel, or rather Dardel, as he would just prefer. And that painting could be a case. I mean, we don't know. We know it was bought by Rolf Demaret in 1933. We don't know from whom, either from the artists. I mean, since it's a kind of interesting personal portrait and personal picture, since it's a portrait of an ex-lover, we always took for granted it's either the artists or the person being depicted. We don't know, but if it is, it's exactly one of those difficult border cases. 1933, a friend, someone who actually supported him, an outspoken anti-Nazi, could that be a plundering kind of a case? Difficult to see Mr. Rolf Demaret as a plunderer, someone who probably even supported him actively. You know, at least that's with our understanding. But it's actually from that difficult period. So it just shows that the cases we had are difficult, but there are worse. And we will continue. And Arpad, you're so quick that we could do this. And thanks to everyone for accepting the invitation. And Arne, you accepted very quickly, and to give a bigger, but both more personal and wider framework. I'm very thankful for you being here. And thanks to all of you coming all the way to Stockholm. Thank you.
Daniel, Ann-Sofi, all the guests from Germany, and to the entire audience, I can't tell you, and Lizzie, of course, Judisk kultur, Sverige, I can't tell you how grateful I am that we made this happen together. And this initiative, you know, there are so many events at a cultural institute, but this was very, very special. It was meaningful. And I can't really tell you how much these discussions mean to me and to all of us here at the Goethe-Institut. I think we've moved forward. We haven't reached any conclusions. The politicians that will ultimately play into all of this were not here, neither Monika Grütters, nor Michelle Müntefering, nor the next culture minister of Sweden. They will all want to have a say in this. And so this conversation must continue. I'm your happy servant. Should you need me, just give me a call. I'll be there like a kangaroo. And I'll just stop right here. But one thing I would like to tell the audience. Of course, I want you to have a great weekend. But Arne Ruth, you opened a horizon this morning. There's right-wing extremism, and this is the context in which we discuss all these things. And the next conference, which we'll have, is about cultural diplomacy in the age of populism, cultural diplomacy in the age of right-wing, rising extremism, again in Europe. I've invited out of 28 European member states, 9 of them have said, yes, we are on board. We want to tackle this problem. And again, we won't have final answers and there won't be any conclusions, but we want to raise the awareness of the situation in which we are, and it's damn serious. So France, Finland, Spain, Italy, the Czech Republic, and others, they have said yes, they have put money on the table, and we will have a conference here in Stockholm with the head of Switzerland. I haven't mentioned Switzerland. The head of Pro Helvetia will be here. So we want to tackle that problem. It's an ongoing conversation, and we will try to tackle it from various perspectives. Tack så mycket to all of you. You're all hugged. Bless you all. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming.